no doubt about it. Of course, men and women have to be treated equally.
In our training, which we call PALM Project, Pursuing and Loving Muslims, we tell everyone that all your interactions with Muslims, and in fact with everybody, should be one of three things. You're building bridges, which means making friendships and good relationships. You're sharing truth about the Bible and about Jesus, and you're challenging falsehood, or in the case of Islam, you're challenging Islam. So today's activity and lesson comes under that category of challenging Islam. Today we want to talk about women's rights in Islam. And you know, I've said little things over the years, but I'm an American and I have experience that's more limited than Dr. Wafa's because she's been raised in the Middle East. And she has experience with her own personal experience and also with a lot of things that people have confided to her. So today we're really blessed to have her. And I want to ask her a couple of questions. First, let me ask this. How do you feel that women are treated in Islam compared to how they're treated in, say, the West, in America or Europe? You've lived in both countries. Maybe you can give us some ideas of how you see that and whether you think it's related to culture or the teachings of the Quran and Islam. You probably know in the West, they always tell us, oh, it's just the culture, it has nothing to do with Islam. What do you think about that?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you over. I missed you, I haven't seen you in a while. So if Muslim women are treated the same way American women are treated, we should expect every Islamic country to be as great as America is, or any other country that treats its women respectfully and fairly. Because I believe the situation in any country is a reflection of how women are treated. Look at any Islamic country and the misery they are living in right now is a proof that half of their population mistreated and abused.
Here's an example of women's rights. Islam says women are lacking in mind and religion. Here are the references. How does Islam treat women? Lacking in mind and religion. And this is something that's verified between the Hadith and the Quran, both in the Sunni and in the Shia documents. And the interesting thing about that is that we can actually prove that women are neither. And you have to think about this if you are a rational Muslim, if you know how to weigh things with critical thinking. If we can prove that women are not lacking in mind and religion, and that is something that is very strong, it's one of the strongest teachings about women in Islam between the mutawatir, the acceptable hadith, and the Quran itself. I think that is really something you need to think about as an extreme challenge. So for example, with women, studies show that women actually have higher IQs than men, and there are more university students in America that are women than men, and also a university in the Middle East for its engineering division has higher requirements for women to enter than for men. And one of the women engineering students there told me that's because women in this country get higher marks. They're studying harder and they get higher marks and are actually have higher requirements for entrance. And from her point of view, better students than the men. So this is quite a bit of evidence. In fact, I have the chart, the admissions chart from that school in Arabic, but I can read enough of it to see, yes, they do have different admissions requirements. So no one can prove that women are not as intelligent as men. The only way that would be is if you are keeping them in a box, you don't educate them. And as Nawal Asadawi says, if women are village women, they don't have anything else to think about. They're not thinking intelligent thoughts. But when given a chance, women are at least as intelligent as men. And if you look at any culture in the world, you will find women are more religious. And I've been to many places in the world, and whether it's in America in church, in the Hispanic world, going to churches there, in the Far East, going to the temples, all these ways we see that women are actually more religious. So there's no way this can be proven. And I would like you all to know that this is disproven. And yet we see that since Islam says that, women are treated as second class.
You're asking Wafa Sultan if women lacking in mental ability? Of course we're not. Of course we are full human being. Actually, to be honest, and I won't be exaggerating if I say I truly believe the role women play when it comes to building nations, is much more important than the role a man is playing. Because we are, in charge of raising men and women. So our role is much more important than the men role.
In California, these are things I have heard. Actually, I have quite a long list of things. I'm just going to give you a few today, but here's something that was told to me by 3 people who really should know better. One of the reasons that we're lacking in mind is the Quran says that our testimony is worth half of a man's. I was told by a pre-law student in Berkeley, by a woman pharmacist, and by an Islamic newspaper publisher. They all said it is right that a woman's testimony is half of a man's. Friends, this is the United States of America. Men and women are equal. Do you see why I think the idea of Sharia law is a little bit ominous? If they're going to go backwards and say that our testimony is worth half a man, and these are educated women, a pre-law student.
I always say education without values has no value. So being highly educated, it doesn't mean you have good values. If highly educated women say women testimony is half of a man, then I don't know. For me, it is very hard to accept it. It is very hard even to explain it. So we need to be educated and learn good values. Why? The question is, why in the first place they are in America? Why they don't go back to their country and practice their teaching the way they want? Why we don't ask him this question, why are you here? Go back and practice freely, practice Islam the way you want. If you give American visa to any Muslim man or woman in the Arab world, they will be here in a matter of few hours. And you're telling me we have to change the American life so we can apply Islam here? Muslim men have the right to have 4 wives. Could you imagine when you are living with 3 other women sharing your husband? How do you feel? How do you feel? You feel you're an unfit person. You feel you're an incomplete person. If your husband needs another 3 women to fill his life, then who am I? Who am I? I'm not up to be, enough to handle his life, to raise his kids. It is a disaster in our countries. It is a disaster.
This is from an Islamic fatwa book, an answer to a woman's question. She said, I have done everything in my contract, my marriage contract, to please this man, and he still wants to marry again? Can I prevent him from marrying because I've kept my end of the bargain? I did the best I could, and he still wants another woman. And she's told, you do not have the right to prevent him. He may desire more children, or he may feel that having only one wife does not keep him chaste. So in their point of view, having multiple women helps you to be chaste. In the Christian point of view, having multiple women is adultery and is the opposite of being chaste. So how does this impact society? I've told you about some books that analyze these things, and here's a quote from one of the women who came out of this society. She says, men do not even have to exercise their right to additional wives for the damage to be done. By allowing men to be loyal to up to 4 wives, the stage is set for women to always distrust their husbands, nor can they trust their friends. And what I have heard from women in this culture is this is one reason that covering is continued, because the older women feel threatened by the younger women. They look at every woman as a potential threat. So they want to be sure that the young women do cover. So it defers reform because they don't want to lose their situation. Any woman, even their friends, could be a competitor. So Noni Darwish says this makes women adversaries. Women can chase a married man. A woman who's childless is very vulnerable. If she gets married and she doesn't have a baby in the first or second year, most likely her husband will look for another wife. So this you're living on this, under this sort of Damocles feeling. And because the women can't trust each other, they're all potential threats, she says it goes against making support groups. So the women can't easily band together because they don't trust what the other woman might do with their husband. And so as a result, because women don't trust the men, it can lead to manipulative wives. They can't trust him, they're not close to him, they try to get him to do things by indirect means.
Muslim men have the right to beat their women, and they practice this right, claiming to discipline unruly المرأة الناشز, and the best translation is unruly and unleashed women. When you beat a human being, you deprive them of their potential. You deprive them of their human identity. That's why we are paying high prices in every Islamic country now.
Because of this pain of polygamy for women, they may endure beatings. We already talked about how difficult it is to leave when you haven't been educated and you've started having children early. So you endure beatings. And then also it's authorized from way back. It says in the Quran and the fatwa, if you read in these books, affirm it for today. If you're feeling like your husband is losing interest in you and he's going to be getting other wives and you don't want to be disgraced by divorce, you can make a deal with him. And the deal is you will give up your sex night to some other woman, or you can pay him money or anything to buy this saving face, because shame and honor are so important in that culture. So if you're a woman getting your menopause, you're also threatened with polygamy. Or if you don't have a child. So many sad things.
The man has to have the upper hand. The man has to make the big decisions regarding even her own life. Women has to ask for a permission in order to go visit her family, even to attend her own father's funeral. She has to ask for a permission. There are too many examples regarding every detail in our life. Every detail. If I don't have the power to make my own decision, do you expect me to be able to build a family, to build a nation, to raise my kids the right way.
If there's only one thing you learn from this lesson, is that the practices of Islam concerning women are actually based on the principles of Islam, because you will not hear that in the West. Anything that's not favorable about Islam, they will blame on culture.
The mistreatment women receive in any country in the Islamic world is deeply rooted in the Islamic teaching. It is not cultural. It is because of the Islamic teachings, and I can prove it to you. We have Christians who live in the Middle East. Have you ever heard a Christian man kill his daughter because of honor killing? To honor his family because she did something that he didn't approve? Of course we never heard. We never heard. Even we as Muslim people share the same culture with our Christian who live in our country, but they don't do what Muslim men, do to their women. And let's say Pakistan is not Arab country. We have totally different cultures between Syria and Pakistan. And you see people in Pakistan mistreat their women, even different culture, but because of we practice same religion. So don't tell me the mistreatment is based on cultural things. It is not. It is based on Islamic teachings. And, because we behave like Pakistani more than we behave like our sisters and brothers of Christian religion.
If you ask a Muslim woman how she is treated, or what do you think about Islam, almost always you will get a certain answer. It will be, Islam treats women very well. I like it. But the situation is, when you know that that's what they have to say, it becomes less convincing. One of the highly regarded books of Sunni Islamic law, called Reliance of the Traveler, calls it an enormity. It is considered a big sin to say anything embarrassing to us about Islam. You must cover it. You can't bring attention to anything that embarrasses Muslims or Islam. So when you think about that, does that really help improvement and progress with women's rights, with a lot of abuses and conditions? My way of thinking is that would not help, because you're covering it. And we say in the West, one of the first steps towards progress is admitting and open up and exposing. What does our reformer Ayan say about this? She says the psychological conditioning is very powerful. Muslim girls have internalized their subordination. They never succeed in escaping from the cage. They are like prisoners suffering from Stockholm syndrome, comparable to slaves who prefer what? Prefer the certainty of existence in slavery to a freedom that they perceive as treacherous.
I believe the worst kind of slavery is when the slave believes he's free. He or she is free. And that's exactly the case with Muslim women. They are indoctrinated at very early age to believe they are less. They are less than man. So they are inside a cage, and it is the damage, has been done in the first 10 years of your life. Who you are, who you were told you were at very early age. So the damage has been done, and it is very hard to undo the damage. It's very hard to convince them that they are slaves to unfair teachings, and they need to get out of it in order to lead a normal life.
Have you heard of someone being institutionalized, or you get used to something? If you're in an enclosed space, you almost get what's called agoraphobia, a fear of going out. So this is what happens to these women, and when you talk to hundreds and thousands of these women, as I have, you will see that this definitely is there in many of them. And some will tell you that they do want to flee. Others are afraid, and they have good reasons to be afraid. They can be considered outcast. If you are considered outcast, you are also legitimate prey, either for temporary marriages or for rape. If you read her stories in this book about what happened to women in Somali refugee camps in Kenya that didn't have a man there to protect them, it's horrible. So you don't want to be a prey. And you're afraid of that, or maybe you were married young and you can't support yourself and your children. There are many reasons that you could be afraid of leaving the cage. So as women in the West are being encouraged to become Muslim, all of this stuff is denied. So what really is the truth? Is the way it's presented to us in the West true?
It is not accurate. They're very confused between the real Islam that we practice in Islamic countries and the American Islam. Those women are protected under the American Constitution. No one can beat them. No one can mistreat them. No one can abuse them because they are protected under the American laws. They're not living under Islamic Sharia. They are living under the American Constitution. So they are very confused. They are practicing the American Islam, which is adapting very well to the American culture. So they're not. Big difference between living in the Islamic world as a woman and living here in America. Big difference. They have never had any experience dealing with the Islamic laws in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt, in any Arab country or in any Islamic country. They should go back to Saudi Arabia and live for 1 week and then come back and say Islam is a perfect religion that respects women and protect their human rights. Just 1 week in any Islamic country. Then they have the right to compare between their lives in Islamic country or their American life.
The story of women in Islam. What is it like through their life cycle? And I say the story of women in Islam is a flat line. A good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's drama. There's good versus evil. Think of the stories that you like. This is what's happening. Beginning, middle, end, drama, and reversals of fortune sometimes happen. So the poor people end up rich, the happy people end up poor. Things get restored, and the ones we usually like most have a happy ending. But in her story in Islam, how does it start out? It doesn't start out happy. We learned women are less than men from the beginning. They didn't start out equal. What happens in the middle? They suffer great indignities throughout life. And how does it end? They have a greater chance than men of ending up in hell, according to the Hadith. Most people in hell are women. And if they are fortunate enough to go to heaven, what is it they are? They can be one of 72 perpetual virgins married to a man who's sort of their husband. And being a doctor, I can tell you perpetual virginity is not a pleasant thing. So, the man's always getting happy, the woman's always suffering.
We will never be able to lead a productive, good life unless our women are treated fairly and respectfully. So they can give, their potential, whatever they have. They can raise their kids the best way they can. But once you, at very early age, you indoctrinate girls to believe they are less in mental ability, you are depriving them from their human identity. Of course, women need to be treated in a better way in order to improve our life in the Islamic world.
Commenting on this different view of women, Egyptian reformer Nawal Assadoui has made these comments. When fundamentalist movements become powerful, it is women, especially poor women, who suffer most. These movements direct their attack against women and minority groups, which we know from experience includes Christians. She goes on to say, in the name of protection, honor, sacred motherhood, women are degraded, exploited inside and outside the home. So even though Muslims usually say this is a pedestal, Nawal Assadoui sees through that and says, no, we're using those words, but just to exploit them. Here's a quote from another Muslim reformer, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, from her excellent book, The Caged Virgin. Do you have to be mistreated, raped, locked up, and repressed yourself in order to put yourself in someone else's position? Is it not hypocritical to trivialize or tolerate these practices when you yourselves are free? So what if we want to do something about it and expose these deeds of darkness, as the Bible calls them? What would be our goals? So here I have a few goals. One is to expose them, Ephesians 5:11, expose these deeds so people will know about them. Many times when things are exposed, there's progress. So we are actually given rights as Christians through the New Testament to expose these bad practices that are going on around the world. And many of them are in Muslim countries. Also in other countries there is a lot going on, as you hear about on the news. And reform, we would like to see improvement of women's rights in Muslim cultures. And we can go with Proverbs 31:8 for that we need to speak for those that really can't defend themselves.
It was a total surprise. Even the neighborhood I was born and raised in had many Christian neighbors, but there was no communication between us, and the Christians were not able to express or even to talk about their own God, their own religion. So when I came to the state, it was total surprise about what kind of God Christians believe in. I always say, in order to change people in the Islamic countries, we should come up with a new concept of God, a loving God, because the God we've been worshiping is hateful God. So we need to change the concept so people, follow a loving God and eventually become loving people.